Seraphina didn't know that the man watching her from across the restaurant had turned down 3 marriage proposals from foreign princesses that very morning. She didn't know that he could hear every whispered comment the other diners made about the woman sitting alone, checking her phone for the 100th time. And she certainly didn't know that in approximately 4 minutes, he would change the entire trajectory of her life. All she knew was that Marcus was 45 minutes late, and the pitying glances from the waitstaff were becoming unbearable. She stared at the candle flickering between 2 empty wine glasses, her chest tight with humiliation. The restaurant was one of the finest in the capital. All velvet curtains and crystal chandeliers, the kind of place where couples fed each other bites of chocolate mousse and whispered promises they might actually keep. She'd saved for 2 months to afford the dress she was wearing, a deep burgundy thing that made her feel, for one brief moment when she'd looked in the mirror, like she belonged somewhere beautiful. Now, she just felt like a fool. Her phone buzzed. Finally. She snatched it up, heart hammering, and read the message. Sorry, babe. Something came up. Rain check? That was it. No explanation. No apology that actually meant anything. Just 2 sentences that erased the 3 hours she'd spent getting ready, the nervous excitement that had kept her awake the night before, the tiny, foolish hope that maybe this time would be different. She set the phone face down on the table. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of all these strangers who were already looking at her like she was something to be pitied. The waiter approached, his expression carefully neutral. Will you be ordering now, miss, or waiting a bit longer for your companion? The word companion made her want to laugh. Or scream. Possibly both. I'll just have the check for the wine, she said, her voice steady even though her hands were trembling beneath the table. He's not coming. I'm so sorry to hear that. The waiter's sympathy was genuine, which somehow made it worse. I'll bring that right over. She nodded, already calculating how quickly she could escape, how far she'd have to walk before she could let the tears fall without anyone seeing. Then the chair across from her scraped against the floor. Seraphina's head snapped up, a sharp refusal already forming on her lips, because if Marcus thought he could just show up now and expect her to smile and pretend everything was fine, he had another thing coming. But it wasn't Marcus. The man settling into the empty seat was a stranger, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that looked effortlessly perfect. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, warm and golden, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. What are you doing? She demanded, too startled to be polite. Saving you from the most tedious evening of your life. He picked up the menu as if he belonged there, as if he'd been expected all along. Trust me, anyone who would leave you waiting in a restaurant like this isn't worth the mascara you'd waste crying over him. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I'm sorry. Do I know you? Not yet. He smiled, and something in her chest did a strange little flip. But I'd like to change that, if you'll let me. She should have told him to leave. She should have called the waiter over, collected her things, and walked out with whatever dignity she had left. That would have been the sensible thing to do. But Seraphina had been sensible her entire life. And where had it gotten her? Alone at a table for two, wearing a dress she couldn't afford, waiting for a man who couldn't be bothered to show up. You realize this is insane, she said, completely. He didn't seem bothered by the assessment. But I saw you sitting here, and I saw the way your face fell when you read that message, and I thought to myself, that's a woman who deserves better than whatever excuse is glowing on that screen. So here I am. Here you are, she repeated slowly. A complete stranger who just sat down at my table uninvited. Would you like me to leave? The question was genuine. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he held himself perfectly still, waiting for her answer. He would go if she asked him to. She knew it with a certainty she couldn't explain. She thought about her empty apartment, the leftover pasta in the fridge, the rom-com she'd planned to watch alone, again, like every other Friday night for the past year. "No," she heard herself say. "Stay." His smile widened, and she felt it like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Then let's order." He signaled the waiter with an easy confidence that spoke of someone used to being obeyed. "Do you have any preferences? Or shall I surprise you?" "Surprise me." The words came out before she could stop them, and she realized with a start that she meant it. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this. The waiter arrived and the stranger, her stranger, she supposed, ordered without looking at the menu. Dishes she'd never heard of, wines with names she couldn't pronounce, a feast that would probably cost more than her rent. "I can't let you pay for all of that," she said when the waiter left. "I don't even know your name." "Damon." He said it simply, like it was the most ordinary name in the world. "And I assure you the expense is negligible. Consider it an apology on behalf of whoever was foolish enough to stand you up." "Seraphina," she offered in return, "and you don't need to apologize for someone else's bad behavior." "Perhaps not. But I find myself wanting to make up for it anyway." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those golden eyes. "Tell me, Seraphina, what do you do when you're not sitting alone in restaurants, looking like you'd rather be anywhere else?" She laughed despite herself. "Is that what I looked like?" "You looked like a woman trying very hard to hold herself together. Which, I should note, is not the same thing as falling apart." He tilted his head. "There's strength in that. Most people would have left the moment they realized they'd been abandoned. I was about to leave. But you didn't. You stayed. And now here we are." Here we are, she thought, sitting across from a handsome stranger who spoke like something out of a fairy tale and looked at her like she was the only person in the room. "I'm a librarian," she said, answering his earlier question, "at the public archives downtown. A keeper of stories." Something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly for her to read. "That suits you. Does it? You have the look of someone who lives partly in other worlds. Someone who knows that reality is only one of many possible truths." She stared at him. "That's a very strange thing to say to someone you just met." "I've been told I'm a very strange person." He smiled again, and she noticed for the first time the sharpness of his canines, slightly more pronounced than normal. A trick of the candlelight, surely. But strange isn't always bad. Sometimes it's just different. And different can be exactly what you need. The food arrived in waves, each dish more exquisite than the last. He encouraged her to try everything, watching with undisguised pleasure as she closed her eyes over a bite of something rich and buttery that melted on her tongue. "This is incredible," she admitted. "I don't think I've ever eaten anything this good." "Then you've been eating at the wrong places, or with the wrong people." He poured more wine into her glass. "Life is too short for mediocre meals and mediocre company." "Is that your philosophy? No mediocrity?" "My philosophy is simpler than that." He set down the bottle, his gaze holding hers. "Find what matters. Protect it. Let everything else fall away." She felt the weight of those words settle over her like a blanket, warm and heavy. There was something in his voice, something old and certain, that made her believe he meant every syllable. "What matters to you?" she asked. "That's the question, isn't it?" He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "For a long time, I would have said duty, responsibility, the expectations others placed on my shoulders." He lifted his wine glass, swirling the dark liquid. "But lately, I've been thinking that perhaps I've been looking at it all wrong. Perhaps what matters isn't what I'm supposed to do, but what I choose to do, who I choose to be." "That sounds like the beginning of a crisis," she said lightly. He laughed, and the sound was warm and rich, filling the space between them. Perhaps it is. Or perhaps it's the beginning of something else entirely. They talked for hours, about books and history, about the city and its secrets, about dreams they'd abandoned and hopes they still carried. He listened to her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years, and when she spoke about her work, about the joy of discovering a story no one had read in centuries, his eyes lit up with genuine interest. He was careful, she noticed, to reveal very little about himself. His answers were vague, deflecting, always turning the conversation back to her. But she didn't mind. Not tonight. Tonight, she wanted to be the center of someone's attention, to matter to someone, even if it was just a stranger she would never see again. "It's late," she said finally, glancing at her phone. "Nearly midnight. She'd been here for almost 4 hours. I should go. Let me walk you home." "That's not necessary." "Perhaps not." He stood, offering his hand. "But I'd like to." She looked at his outstretched palm, at the calluses she could see even in the dim light, and thought about all the reasons she should say no. He was a stranger. She knew nothing about him. This entire evening had been an impulsive decision made in a moment of weakness. But his hand was warm when she took it, and something in her chest hummed with a rightness she couldn't explain. They walked through the quiet streets, the city soft and dreamlike in the darkness. He stayed close, but not too close, his presence a steady warmth at her side. The silence between them was comfortable, easy, as if they'd known each other for years instead of hours. "This is me," she said when they reached her building, an old brownstone with creaking stairs and windows that never quite closed properly. He looked up at the facade, something unreadable crossing his face. "It suits you." "You keep saying things suit me. What does that mean?" "It means I'm learning you." He stepped closer and her breath caught. The books, the burgundy dress, the building with character instead of chrome. You value substance over show, depth over glitter. His hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentleness that made her shiver. "I find that rare and precious." "Damon." His name was a whisper on her lips. "Yes?" "Who are you?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, something sad and sweet at the edges. "Ask me again someday, and I'll tell you the truth." Before she could respond, he leaned in and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Soft, reverent. The kind of kiss that felt like a promise. "Good night, Seraphina. Thank you for letting me stay." And then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness like he'd never been there at all. She dreamed of golden eyes and candlelight, of a voice that wrapped around her like silk. When she woke, she half convinced herself it had all been a fantasy, a story she'd invented to make herself feel better about being stood up. But then she found the card tucked into her purse. Heavy cream paper, embossed with a crest she didn't recognize. No name, no number. Just 3 words in elegant script. His loss. Mine. Her heart hammered as she traced the letters with her fingertip. This wasn't over. She could feel it in her bones, in the strange new awareness humming beneath her skin. Whatever had started last night was just the beginning, and she had no idea what came next. A week passed, then 2. Seraphina went through the motions of her ordinary life, shelving books and cataloging manuscripts, eating lunch at the same cafe, walking the same route home. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. She kept seeing him. Not in person, no. He hadn't appeared again, hadn't left any other mysterious cards or sent any messages, but she saw him everywhere else. His face in the newspaper, half hidden behind someone else's shoulder at some gala. His name mentioned in hushed conversations between patrons who didn't know she could hear. Damon Blackwood, the Alpha King, ruler of the 7 territories, the most powerful man in the known world. And he had sat across from her in a restaurant and ordered her dessert. She felt faint every time she thought about it. "You look pale," her coworker Nessa said one afternoon. "Are you getting sick?" "I'm fine." Seraphina shelved another book with more force than necessary. "Just tired." "Tired or avoiding something? Can it be both?" Nessa raised an eyebrow but didn't push. That was the nice thing about her. She knew when to let things go. Seraphina finished her shift and walked home the long way, trying to clear her head. It didn't work. Every shadow looked like broad shoulders and dark hair. Every passing car might have been a royal motorcade. She was being ridiculous. One evening didn't mean anything. He probably did this all the time, swept in to play hero for lonely women and then disappeared back to his palace and his responsibilities and his 3 rejected princesses. She was just another story, a brief diversion from a life she couldn't even imagine. So why did her chest ache every time she thought about never seeing him again? She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice the figure standing outside her building until she nearly walked into him. Seraphina. Her head snapped up. Damon stood on her doorstep, dressed in dark clothes that somehow looked both simple and impossibly expensive. His golden eyes found hers, and everything else fell away. "What are you doing here?" she breathed. "I couldn't stay away." He said it like a confession, like it cost him something to admit. "I tried. I told myself to leave you alone, to let you live your life without the complications I would bring. But I kept thinking about you. The way you laughed. The way your eyes lit up when you talked about books. The way you took a chance on a stranger who had no right to ask it of you. You're the Alpha King?" "Yes." "You didn't tell me? Would you have stayed if I had?" She thought about it. Thought about what she would have done if she'd known who was sitting across from her, offering her wine and watching her with those eyes. "No," she admitted. "I probably would have run." "Then I'm glad I didn't tell you." He stepped closer. "But I'm telling you now. No more secrets. No more half-truths. My name is Damon Blackwood. I am the Alpha King. And I have thought of nothing but you since the moment I walked away from your door." Her heart was racing so fast she could barely breathe. "What do you want from me?" "Everything." The word was raw, honest, stripped of all pretense. "But I'll take whatever you're willing to give. An hour, a conversation, a walk through the city. Anything, Seraphina. Just let me be near you." She should have said no. She should have reminded him of the gulf between them, the impossibility of whatever he was suggesting. She was a librarian who couldn't afford to eat at fancy restaurants. He was the ruler of an empire. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Have you eaten?" He blinked. Then a smile spread across his face, boyish and delighted and so beautiful it made her chest hurt. "I could eat." She made him dinner in her tiny kitchen while he sat at her cramped table and asked about her day. She told him about the medieval manuscript she'd found, water-damaged and forgotten in a corner of the archives, and his eyes lit up with genuine fascination. "I'd like to see it sometime," he said, "if you'd show me." "You want to see a damaged old book? I want to see what you love." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I want to understand what makes you come alive." She stared at their intertwined fingers. His hand was warm, solid, slightly rough with calluses, the hand of a king, the hand of a warrior. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes. People will talk. Let them. Your advisors, your counsel, they won't approve. I don't need their approval." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I've spent my entire life doing what was expected of me. Marrying who I was told to marry, attending events I despised, smiling when I wanted to scream." His jaw tightened. "I'm done. When I saw you in that restaurant, sitting alone in your beautiful dress, refusing to cry even though I could see how much you wanted to, Something in me recognized something in you. I don't know how else to explain it. I just knew. Knew what? That you were the one I'd been waiting for. She let out a shaky breath. You can't possibly know that after one dinner. Can I? He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Tell me you haven't felt it too. Tell me you haven't thought about that night every day since. Tell me you don't feel this thing between us. This pull, and I'll walk away. I'll never bother you again. She couldn't say it. She couldn't lie to him, not when he was looking at her like that. Not when her entire body was humming with the truth. I feel it, she admitted. I don't understand it, but I feel it. Then let me court you. Properly. Let me show you who I am. Not just the crown I wear, but the man beneath it. And if at the end of it you decide this isn't what you want, I'll accept that. But give me a chance, Seraphina. Please. She thought about her quiet life, her predictable routines, the safety of her solitude. Then she thought about golden eyes and candlelight, about a man who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Okay, she said. Show me. The weeks that followed were like something out of a dream. Damon courted her with a patience and attentiveness that left her breathless. He took her to hidden gardens in the palace grounds, showed her libraries filled with books that hadn't been opened in centuries, introduced her to the parts of his life that mattered most to him. And he listened to everything she said, every story she told, every fear she confessed in the quiet hours after midnight. My father left when I was 7, she told him one night, curled against his side on her small sofa. Just walked out and never came back. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I learned early that the only person you could count on was yourself. His arm tightened around her. And Marcus? The man who stood you up? He was the latest in a long line of disappointments. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have terrible taste in men. I pick the ones who are guaranteed to leave because at least then I'm not surprised when they do. And me? His voice was soft. Do you expect me to leave? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know what to expect from you. That's what terrifies me. He shifted, turning so he could look into her eyes. His expression was fierce, intense, burning with something that made her stomach flip. Then let me be clear, he said. I am not going anywhere. Not today, not tomorrow, not in a year or 10 years or 100. I have lived a very long time, Seraphina, and I have never felt anything like what I feel for you. You are not a distraction or a diversion. You are everything, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you if that's what it takes. Damon, I love you. The words fell between them, heavy with truth. I know it's too soon to say it. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But I have learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts are screaming that you are mine, my mate, my partner, my equal in all things. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm just a librarian. You are the keeper of stories. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the wetness on her cheeks. And now you're part of mine. She kissed him then, unable to hold back any longer. He responded with a tenderness that undid her completely, his hands gentle in her hair, his lips soft against hers. I love you too, she whispered when they finally broke apart. I think I've loved you since you sat down at my table and told me I deserved better. You do. He pressed his forehead to hers. You deserve everything, and I intend to give it to you. But not everyone was pleased with the Alpha King's choice. The confrontation came at a state dinner, one of the first events Damon had brought her to publicly. She wore a gown he'd had made for her, deep green silk that made her feel like a princess, and she stood at his side with her chin held high while hundreds of eyes judged her. Most were merely curious, but some were hostile. She's nobody, she heard someone whisper. A commoner. He's throwing away centuries of tradition for a pretty face. Probably some scheme to get close to the throne. Gold digger. Give it 6 months, he'll come to his senses. She kept her expression neutral, but her hands were trembling. Then Lord Varen approached. He was older, distinguished, with silver at his temples and cruelty in his eyes. One of Damon's most vocal critics on the council. Miss Seraphina. He didn't bow. Didn't offer any of the courtesies due to the Alpha King's companion. Enjoying your evening? Very much, thank you. I imagine it must all be quite overwhelming. The grandeur, the protocol, the weight of expectations you're clearly not equipped to handle. His smile was a knife wrapped in silk. Perhaps you should consider whether you're truly suited for this life, before you embarrass yourself further. She felt Damon stiffen beside her, felt the fury rolling off him in waves. Lord Varen, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Step back. I'm merely offering advice, Your Majesty. The girl is in over her head. Anyone with eyes can see it. What I see, Damon said, is a man who has forgotten his place. He moved forward, putting himself between Seraphina and the Lord. Let me remind you, Seraphina is under my protection. She is my honored guest, and any disrespect shown to her is disrespect shown to me. With all due respect, Your Majesty. You have none. Damon's eyes flashed gold, bright and blazing, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You never have. You've hidden behind protocol and tradition to mask your contempt for anyone you consider beneath you, but I am done tolerating it. The room had gone silent. Everyone was watching. You will apologize to Miss Seraphina, now, and then you will excuse yourself from this event, and tomorrow, you will resign from the council. Lord Varen's face went white. You can't. I can. Damon's voice was ice. I am the Alpha King, and I am tired of surrounding myself with people who value bloodlines over character, cruelty over kindness, tradition over truth. Consider this a new era, Lord Varen. One in which people are judged by who they are, not where they came from. The silence stretched. Then Lord Varen bowed, stiff and furious. My apologies, Miss Seraphina, he gritted out. Please excuse me. He turned and walked away, and the room slowly exhaled. Damon turned back to her, his expression softening instantly. Are you all right? I'm fine. She reached for his hand, squeezing it. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He lifted her hand to his lips. I told you. I protect what matters, and you matter more than anything. She felt the truth of it settle into her bones. This was real. He was real. And whatever came next, they would face it together. 3 months later, Seraphina stood in a garden filled with flowers she couldn't name, wearing a gown of white and gold, trembling as Damon slid a ring onto her finger. I choose you, he said, his voice carrying to the gathered witnesses but his eyes only on her. Today and every day. In this life and whatever comes after. You are my mate, my partner, my queen. And I will love you until the stars burn out and beyond. I choose you too, she whispered. I didn't know what I was looking for that night in the restaurant. I just knew I was tired of being alone. But you gave me so much more than company. You gave me a home, a family, a future I never dared to dream of. He kissed her then, in front of everyone, and she felt something click into place inside her chest, like a door finally opening to let in the light. Long live the Queen, someone called, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Later, in the quiet of their chambers, she lay in his arms and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. I still can't believe this is my life, she murmured. Believe it. He pressed a kiss to her hair. You deserve every moment of it. A year ago, I was eating leftover pasta alone in my apartment, wondering if anyone would ever see me, really see me. I see you. His arms tightened around her. I will always see you. She smiled against his chest. Do you ever think about that night? What would have happened if you hadn't sat down? No. His voice was certain. Because it was never a question of if, only when. We were always going to find each other, Seraphina. One way or another. That's what fate does. You believe in fate? I believe in you. He tilted her chin up, meeting her eyes. And that's enough. She kissed him softly, pouring everything she felt into it. Outside, the moon rose over the kingdom that was now half hers to rule. There would be challenges ahead, she knew. Enemies who resented her rise, traditions that would take time to change, a world that wasn't always kind to those who defied expectations. But she wasn't afraid. She had walked into that restaurant alone and broken, and she had walked out with the beginning of everything. His loss had become her gain, and she would never stop being grateful for the stranger who had seen her at her lowest and decided she was worth staying for. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.